So now you too have experienced the genius of Ozark Season 3. Was I right? Was I right? Alright, so now we can talk about it. First, we're going to talk about two of the most shocking moments of the show, of the season, and then we'll do character highlights. So, I couldn't believe it when Helen got shot in the head right at the edge of the frame. That was so incredibly well shot, with her brains splattered all over Marty and Wendy just as they'd gotten off the plane, touching down in Mexico. And then Navarro gives them a hug, again while they're covered in Helen, saying he's excited about their future together. So much came into that scene to make it just a thing of beauty. That's the scene that I immediately rewound to be like, I can't believe that just happened. So I'm sure Marty and Wendy would have liked to have rewound it as well, but they were living it. Also, that Nelson, remember the callback earlier in the season when Helen's like, if you ever get the call from me, you'll let me know, right? And he's like, oh yeah, sure. Did not tell her. And you gotta be impressed by Navarro's showmanship. He's welcoming Marty and Wendy into his arms, literally, but he's reminding them of what can happen if he doesn't like you anymore. He's a good leader. I was genuinely worried, though, about who would die when that plane touched down, because no one ever talks about Ozark. Today I think it trended not just because it's a good show, but to be honest, I think part of the reason it trended this morning was people were like, oh my god, I had no idea Ozark was coming back today, even though they've been kind of advertising it. It was nuts. It just again, seemingly came out of nowhere. Must be frustrating for the people who make the show to constantly have to get viewers into their corner again and again and again instead of building an audience. Oh, as some of you have said, maybe the quarantine will be the best thing that ever happened to Ozark and we'll finally make it a big show. But I thought this could be the final season because they obviously are setting up a season 4, and what a season 4 they're setting up. But I didn't know that going in. So I thought that maybe Wendy or Marty would be killed when the plane touched down. Maybe Jason Bateman would want to go out with a bang, Harrison Ford style. Get me out of here. I've had enough of this show. I don't want to do it anymore. Because he was so, not into season 2. So I was worried. And I was delighted. That's another thing. I guess I shouldn't have been, I like Helen, but I was, so worried about Wendy and Marty. I was like, they're gonna make it. This is so fantastic. But speaking of Helen, Wendy's the new Helen, obviously. So I hope she's happy. I hope she's happy with that new role. And you can even see that foreshadowing when she's talking to the police officer when she's on the run with her brother, and the police officer was like, "Are you a lawyer?" And she's like, "No. She's not actually a lawyer, so she can't exactly do what Helen did." I'll be curious to see how they work that out. But I think for all intents and purposes, she's the new Helen. But as they say, when you take a new spot, you make a vacancy in your old one. And so I don't know if being the new Helen is maybe the greatest thing to ever happen. We'll see. I'm very interested in this. She's very different than Helen. They're very similar, but yet also very different. On that note, FBI agent Maya Miller, did end up intervening in a drug war. They won. I loved their business sensibility, Marty and Wendy, when they were like, how can we beat Helen? I know. We could end this drug war. And how could we, I love their thinking. We'll just end a drug war. I like their can-do attitude. It's what makes them so much fun to root for. And that they actually get the job done. The brilliance of the drone, the way it was slipped into the script, of just, being a way to cheer up Jonah, who's been down, and get him outside of the house and, outside of the casino. But that it would escalate to being such a crucial thing to get it to the point where the drone was watching that hit, and then they had footage of this so they could give it to Maya Miller. And I love the way Maya was like, if I had an uncropped version of this with Ruth Langmore's card be right there, I was like, Maya, you're great. So that was excellent. That was just really well put together. But I am curious to see if Maya Miller could be corrupted. I love Jason Bateman the way I like that at the end of the season, everyone just put their cards on the table, I guess, to use a good casino metaphor. And, not only was Marty like, if you don't give this information to the FBI and act on the other drug cartel, my family will die. And then I also love that he said, you know what, you're just going to kill your career, Maya, but hey, it's okay, you'll still be a great person. And I think that was a big learning moment, a turning point for Maya Miller, that, you can't fight the good fight being 100% clean, necessarily. I'm very curious to see where their two characters go together. We'll talk about what happened in Mexico in a moment. All right, so the other shocking thing, obviously, about this season was Wyatt and Darlene. That was a very awkward sex scene. I was like, wow, they're really going for it. But I think it's to the credit of the actors that they did sell their connection. I really do believe them as a couple. I think it's very interesting. Wyatt is definitely, older than he has like an older sensibility than he actually is. And Darlene in some ways is younger than her, than she actually is in terms of her sensibility. But I do think they are a formidable couple. I think she's good. I think Wyatt's good for Darlene, and I think Darlene's good for Ruth. I mean, the fact that the Langmores and the Snells would join forces to represent the locals of the area when everyone else is coming in, all these outsiders, I think it is a beautiful thing. I liked when Ruth looked at the field of poppies and she's like, it's beautiful. And I was like, it is, although I do suspect it was green screened. All right, so anyway, Darlene, I have to say, for all her craziness, I thought she did a good job this season in the way she handled things. I thought particularly the way she handled Frank Jr. I mean, she knew she needed Ruth in her corner, and she got it done. And in a way that didn't start a war with Frank Jr.'s father, in the Kentucky Mafia. She went up to him and she said, look, if you want our people to go to war and kill each other, fine. She said, you know where I live. She was pretty badass in the last few episodes. And then she said, you can either do that or you can take these millions of dollars that I'm offering you. I mean, I thought that was good. I think she handled it really well. And I think that Frank was never going to stop. I think that, because, Ruth was supposed to be untouchable. And she was very touched. So I think that Frank Jr. just couldn't be left alone. Ruth was going to be eventually killed. Because Ruth also couldn't stop herself. She's a little bit like sometimes a mad dog. I'm very curious to see about that as well. But I think that Frank Jr. obviously is the one in the wrong there. And I think no matter how Ruth handled him, he would not be happy with the way she has to say no to him in some regard. All right, so Ruth, let's go into the characters now. So Ruth's story arc to me was amazing. And I think the biggest revelation, the shocker, was that she didn't tell Marty about her last conversation with Helen. When she went to Helen and she said, I'm out, don't worry about me, I don't want any repercussions from Navarro. And Helen said, well, if Marty and Wendy were no longer part of the picture, would you come back? And Ruth said, you know where to find me, and she never warned anybody. That is a big uh-oh for Marty. But Marty, what does he expect? I think that Ruth has turned a corner. I think that the birds finally went too far. First her father, then no retribution for Frank Jr., and then Ben. I think, I don't see how she could stay. I think the writers, again, did a good job of making a scenario where Ruth had no choice but to leave. And I think that Marty and Wendy, deep down, still not willing to acknowledge that they're criminals and to be criminals, continues to hurt them. Because I think that they felt they dealt very harshly with Frank Sr. and the Kentucky Mafia, but I think anybody else would be like, you did not. Ruth is eventually going to be killed. And also it keeps anybody else from feeling that they can't touch Ruth. I think they just didn't do right by Ruth. I think undeniably so. I did also like, though, the thread about when you go after someone's children, there's no coming back from that. Navarro, with that bloodbath at the baptism that he had to watch over Skype and just, helplessly. I thought that was very well done. Helen, who just couldn't let Ben go after he told her daughter what she did for a living. Although I don't know why Helen brought her daughter with her. I thought maybe she saw what the birds had and got jealous. I just thought that was a mistake. It was clearly a mistake right from the beginning. And also, what happened to her ex, by the way? Was that a hit that she had orchestrated when he got beat up in the parking lot? That was a weird thing. That was a weird dangling thread that they never did anything with. Now, speaking of Ben, Tom Pelfrey is a force of nature this season. He immediately became a vital part of the family, I think not only to the characters on the show, but to us viewers. He was amazing. He immediately became a lead. You weren't like, where'd this guy come from? You were like, he's amazing, can he stay? Which is how everyone felt. But he couldn't stay. And to basically see him commit suicide as a character, go all mice and men, where he left finally his sister no choice, in a shocking, horrific decision. I mean, that was an incredible story arc to watch. And to see Ben slip back into madness because he stopped taking his pills for the so sad reason that he wanted to be able to, they affected him in terms of his performance with Ruth in bed. So that's why he didn't want to take the pills. So it was a very, I think sympathetic reason. But I don't understand why the pills were dropped from the conversations. Well, I don't know why people weren't slipping them into his food or into his water. We'd be like, I don't know why they didn't keep saying, you can start taking the pills right now, Ben, any day. You could start your path back to wellness if you would just take the damn pills. But he just couldn't do it. And I thought that also what also made it so heartbreaking was that he was right in his logic. Like, he was right when he described what was going down and how it was wrong. But what he didn't understand were social and power dynamics. He was like a child. He wasn't stupid, but he didn't understand the way adults interact. And that was his problem. I mean, his scenes with Wendy on the run are the stuff of awards nominations, and hopefully wins. I mean, he couldn't help but get himself a phone. And then he couldn't help but call. I mean, Wendy just literally couldn't turn her back on him. It was like, help me, help you, and he couldn't do it. It was amazing. I mean, when she left him at the diner, and also I love that she asked, where do you see yourself in 5 years? She's kind of in some ways turning into Navarro a little bit already. I love that she thought back to that. She was like, why would I ask him that? It's so horrible. It was really amazing. It's to make someone feel that they do have a future, when even though they do not. It's to put him very tragically in a sense of safety so that you can get rid of him. I mean, it's horrible what she did. But I think that, again, the writing was excellent, and that you really did feel that she had no choice at that point, and that she literally tried everything that she could to save him. But, you know, how do you save a grown man who won't be committed? It's really tragic and interesting. It was like Michael and Fredo, only this time we really liked Fredo. Now, speaking of putting yourself in harm's way, I felt that's what Marty was doing in the beginning episodes. I also there got nervous that Jason Bateman was going to try and find it out in that regard. I thought he was going to get killed when he went to Mexico. I mean, to protect his own interests, he was making moves against Navarro. And I loved, by the way, that he was saved by Maya red flagging a specific account. An accountant saving another accountant. That was fantastic. And the way Marty did handle it was very impressive. I was like, oh yeah, you got to keep this guy alive. I'm amazed how he got around that locked account. It was very cool. But then Helen, in an effort to protect her own interests, started making moves against Navarro herself. But nobody came to save her. That was fantastic. Not even Nelson. Then, speaking of Nelson, I loved the storyline, the secondary storyline this season. There were a bunch of secondary storylines, but the one about Marty and Wendy's marriage counselor was fantastic. About how they were both paying her off behind the scenes to side with them in the sessions. That was great. And then it escalated to her finding out the truth about them and then wanting even more money. And when she bought that McLaren, I loved that scene with her and Jason Bateman. He was like, get back in your toy and drive away. I thought it was great. And then also, she also didn't realize who she was dealing with. Just, I think, to some degree like the birds. And she got herself killed. I'm glad they did that. You would think you'd be like, oh, they're not going to kill the marriage counselor. But, you know, again, it's very good writing to keep the bad guys sympathetic and that you feel like they have no choice. It's very good. Now, I'm very excited for season 4. I hope they announce shortly that they've greenlit it. I want to see Wendy working more closely with Navarro, who I think has a bit of a crush on her, right? And then also to see Marty and Maya join forces. What can they do together? I think that could be really amazing. And then, of course, now it's Marty versus Ruth. She's got the talk, right? Sometimes for better or worse. But does she have the walk? Can she run a drug cartel? What lessons will Darlene teach her? I'm very excited to see. All right, so what are your thoughts about Ozark Season 3? Share your thoughts down below. This is a spoiler review, so go to town. Subscribe today. And of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.